Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am your co host, Tony Borrego,
And I am your other co host, Rico Borrego.
and this is your podcast, Relatively Sound, answering the age old question: what would you do for a Klondike bar? Now, on today's episode, we, unlike the other week, are not going to be visiting sad songs, the saddest of the March songs. We are going to be talking about funny songs in spirit of April Fools. And whether or not these songs are cheap laughs or actually quite high quality, it doesn't matter. Rico, why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, let's begin with an artist that we've talked about plenty of times on the podcast before, to the point where some people are probably sick of us talking about him. But I mean, when it comes to musicians who write funny music, one of our favorites for sure is Ben Folds. But I'm picking a song that actually lyrically was not written by Ben Folds. It's a song off a collab album he did with British author Nick Hornby. You might know him as the guy who wrote High Fidelity, which was turned into a pretty big movie. And he did an album with Ben where he sent Ben lyrics, and then Ben had to come up with the music and melodies to fit the lyrics. And I think it makes for a very unique album. And there's a lot of funny songs, and a lot of the lyrics read as Ben Folds lyrics. Like, you almost wouldn't even have known Ben didn't write these lyrics. But on this album, um, called Lonely Avenue, you should check it out. There's a song called Password. And it's a hilarious song because the main idea of the song is there's this guy who suspects that his girlfriend or partner is cheating on him. And he tries to break into her email to try to find evidence of her cheating.
The only logical move.
Yeah. And the problem is he doesn't know her password, which is why the song's called Password. So during the verses, he is trying to come up with information that might lead him to a password. So he starts off with going, okay, you went to school in Chicago. Your mom's maiden name is Dupree. Your favorite actor is De Niro. Your birthday is 030883. And, some of these things like your birthday or, your mom's maiden name are things people include in their passwords. And then when you get to the chorus, he spells out his password attempts. So he spells out the word Chicago, Chicago, Dupree, Dupree. And that's kind of the setup for the whole song. Every verse, he's coming up with other things that he knows about his girlfriend. Like, okay, you only drink Chardonnay. Your sister's pet name is Cece. And then Tony, I know your favorite line is, you have a thing for David Blaine.
Don't we all?
And then again, in the chorus, he goes to spell out these words as if he's like typing it out on a keyboard as the password attempt. And the song actually, it's funny because like each verse kind of starts off with him singing, I know you. And he's like basically saying, like, you don't think I know that much about you, or you don't think that I'm listening, but I've been listening this whole time. I know all these things about you. And eventually he does crack the password because in like the bridge of the song, he learns that, she spent a year in Barcelona. Turns out you never went to Tulsa to see your roommate Jane. And eventually he finds out that she's cheating with someone named Anthony because he sings that asshole's name was Anthony. And it comes to the climax of the song, which is my favorite part, where he sings, I think my middle name is Sucker. Um, and yeah, I mean, the whole song is just funny, and it kind of just ends with like, it ends kind of sad because he's like finds out that his girlfriend is cheating on him or his partner, and but it's just funny that the whole song is him like trying to come up with his girlfriend's password, and he's spelling out like the attempts of that as he's trying. I think it's a unique song. I mean, like, I don't think you could tell me there's ever been a song that's like this format of a song.
I will say, out of all the songs we'll probably discuss today, this one is probably the best as a song, like as far as being clever, using the humor to fuel the actual narrative of the song. Like it 10 out
It's
of 10 for
creative.
me.
Yeah. Musically, it's actually maybe out of all these songs, maybe it's the most boring because it's like kind of like a 70s throwback, kind of like a I don't know if lounge is the right word. There's definitely a motif he's going for that I'm not quite sure what it is, but it has that like kind of 70s kind of charm to it.
Right. I
Um,
would say it's more serious sounding than,
then
kind of.
the lyrics would make it
Well,
seem.
it's a little detective vibe,
Oh, I
70s
can see that.
investigator.
Yeah, maybe a little noir.
Sure.
Okay, so what you got? That's my first one. I love that song.
My first one will actually be a Dead Milkmen song. I've been getting into them again. I've been watching their YouTube channel. And what I love about the Dead Milkmen is their songs really go all over the place. It's all satire, and some songs are more of a parody and mocking maybe a group of people, where some of them are just kind of just random made up stuff. Kind of one of the dumber ideas is the thing that only eats hippies, about some monster thing that literally eats hippies. So it's like the perfect excuse to just make a bunch of like Crosby, Stills, Nash references. Um, it like there's literally nothing else to that song. Now, one of the songs I think is a really good song as well would be Methodist Coloring Book, which I just got the tea on this story. Apparently, their singer Rodney, he had ordered like from an infomercial a Catholic coloring book, and he never received it. So he did the logical thing and wrote his own version, Methodist Coloring Book. And there's just so many great lines. Just the way it starts off. You got a Methodist coloring book and you color really well, but don't color outside the lines or God will send you to hell. God hates war, God hates crimes, but he really hates people who color outside the lines. Like that's a pretty great setup to a song. And
That's pretty good.
the it's just ton of energy the whole time. They're screaming the whole song. And I mean, yeah, I think this is a really fun one. It's one of the ones that got me into the band. I would definitely also suggest checking this one out. There's a good video with it too.
Isn't there a song by them that I know you like, but mom likes something about like a bitchin' Camaro or something?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that they do have a variety of songs too, which are basically music with just kind of a story told over it. So Bitch and Camaro being one of their big ones. And, the whole setup is just this kind of like little like bluesy walking bass line, and he's telling the other dude about, oh, I got this new car, I'm gonna be hanging out and stuff, you should ask me about my car. And once they finish their whole intro spiel, which live will have a lot of improv elements and be drawn out, the big takeaway, the punchline is, I've got a bitchin' Camaro. So that's an iconic one from them.
Yeah, I definitely remember actually both those songs you mentioned. I remember hearing them when I was younger. I remember you playing them.
And I still do. I actually finally did get Metaphysical Graffiti on record. Once again, another kind of comedic name there.
Did you ever get those bass tabs you submitted to that forum posted though?
Dude, no, 2012, and there's still been no update. We might have to make an episode about this.
Exactly. We got to get to the bottom of it. Maybe we'll have that guy on as a guest on a future episode.
Right. Our next guest will be a Dead Milkman fan.
All right. Well, we can't do a episode on funny music without mentioning another classic band to the podcast, and that is, of course, the Bare Naked Ladies, Canadian rock band. There's so many choices. I mean, on their first, I don't know, probably what 7 or 8 albums, like there's always, half the album is like songs that are like funny. Sometimes they're over the top silly, sometimes they're silly sweet, sometimes they're silly dumb, but they always have like funny music. I know a lot of people like maybe only know them for 1 week. That's not a good place to start. At least if you're gonna start with them, go like Pinch Me, which it does have funny lyrics, but I think also has like non-funny lyrics that are more like relatable to people. But if you want a song that's like funny and easy to get into, you got to go with a song off their first album, Gordon, and that's If I Had $1,000,000. This kind of like Password fits like a theme with the verses and the choruses. And this song is basically just, you know, both Ed and Stephen Page talking about, if I had $1 million, here's what I would buy. And it's really them like singing about, I think they're kind of trying to be romantic towards someone else. They're like, if I had $1 million, I'd buy you a house. If I had $1 million, I'd buy you furniture for your house. And you have Ed Robinson singing the first line, and you get a call and response with Stephen Page repeating the line back, but then changing it. So like when Ed sings, I'd buy you more furniture for your house, Stephen Page sings maybe a nice Chesterfield or an ottoman. Um, and that repeats itself in the different verses, in the second verse, Ed sings, I'd buy you a fur coat. And Stephen Page is like, but not a real fur coat because that's cruel. And then later, and then the later verse, Ed sings, um, I would buy you a green dress. And Stephen Page sings, but not a real green dress. That's cruel. So it's just kind of like them with these self references that happens verses later on that if you're paying attention, it's funny. And then you get like the choruses where it is a little bit more like lovey dovey, where he's like, they're still doing that. If I had $1 million, I'd buy you this, I'd buy you that. But it always ends with, well, it doesn't always, I guess it doesn't always, but it usually ends with, the verses ending with, if I had $1 million, I'd buy your love. So it's kind of, even though it's a funny song, I guess it's a little bit of a romantic song. But one of the things that I think adds to this song is the improv nature, because after the first chorus, the last line in the first chorus, they sing, if I had $1 million, um, we'd put a tree fort in our yard. And then they sing, maybe we'd put a little tiny fridge in there somewhere. And then afterwards, it's literally just them talking to each other about, yeah, we buy all the cool stuff for the fridge, like pre-wrapped sausages and bacon. And whenever they perform the song live, they would just change and improv different things that they'd buy, and they would just have conversations with each other on stage and with the crowd. And um in the second chorus, they sing about, we'd be all fancy and buy limousines, but we wouldn't have to eat craft dinner anymore. But then in the post chorus, they're like, yeah, but we still would eat craft dinner because it's great.
We
And
would just eat more.
yeah, we just eat more of it. And when they did the song live, people would actually throw boxes of Kraft mac and cheese on stage. And it got to a point, I think, where they had to tell them to stop because it was becoming like a hazardous thing. Um, but yeah, there's a ton of, I mean, like we could literally go through every line, and there's funny lines of like, I'd buy, if I had $1 million, I'd buy you exotic pets. And there's a time where he sings, haven't you always wanted a monkey? And it's just funny. It's one of those funny songs where it's just really lighthearted. So it's like anyone can listen to the song, and there's like nothing offensive about it.
It's pretty wholesome,
Yeah,
really.
that's the word, wholesome.
Yeah, and
But
I,
yeah,
I think BNL are one of those bands that like really effectively use humor, like whether it's just to have a humorous song or to once again elevate and push forward, a message of a song or to, show their characters,
yeah, because
describe them.
they have songs that are just totally silly, like their song A.
Right, right.
Like that's just a funny song that has to do with nothing. Grade 9, I Love You. Funny songs with like lines that don't either make sense or just like, why would you? Like in the song I Love You, at one point he says, I love you. I love fish sticks too. It's like, what? But
And ice cream sandwiches too.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, there's so many B&L songs we talk about, but I mean, I think you have to go with the classic.
Yeah, and so my next pick here is Primus. Now, Primus is kind of interesting to me because as I kind of was diving in to pick out an example, I kind of realized a lot of the humor is more so in the performance necessarily, not necessarily like the lyrics. Sometimes yes, and I'm not gonna say it's always super serious, but it's the delivery that usually gets me laughing.
Like Too Many Puppies.
Like, well, the example I picked for today is DMV. Because I mean, once again, I'll just say the beginning lines. I've been to hell and I spell it. I spell it DMV. Anyone that's been there knows precisely what I mean.
It's
Rico, can you
relatable.
relate? Right.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, I don't think there's probably a good DMV in any state or any country.
Yeah, he talks about coping with it. When I need relief, I spell it THC. Perhaps you may know vaguely what I mean. So I mean, there's just kind of he'll just bridge. He'll say, cold toilet seats, dentist chairs, and trips to DMV. Like with this one, he's just really playing upon it with like the thing with Primus is you just have to hear it to understand it. The music is so wacky. The way he does these accents and voices, he plays these different characters. Jerry was a race car driver is another good example. He's talking about a race car driver who lives a short life because of his lifestyle. My favorite line: "He didn't win no checkered flag, but he never did come in last." And he sings it in this very southern drawl. And at one point, like where it's like an instrumental bit, he makes this sound as if he's imitating a car like driving by.
But it's so like it's almost like lackluster, which adds to like the humor.
Right, right.
Like he's not like doing a serious impression of a race car. It's just like like. And his voice in that song is so like I know you like you said a southern drawl, but it's also like very nasally too.
Yeah, it's
Jerry was a race car driver, like that.
Primus is one of those hard like you just have to listen to understand.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I do agree with like it's about the performance, because I was, and maybe you have a song from them that you're going to talk about later, but like I was trying to pick a Queens of the Stone Age song because they have some kind of funnier songs or lyrics, but I think like you said, it's kind of more the performance than like the lyrics. It's not like B&L or Ben Folds, or like Ben Folds is maybe a better example because B&L sometimes their lyrics are so funny that it is about the delivery, but like Ben Folds, a lot of the time it's like deadpan and like unless you listen to the lyrics, you might miss the humor. But like Queens of the Stone Age and like Primus or Dead Milkmen too, like they're bands where it's like some of it is like the way they perform it. It's almost like watching it's almost like slapstick humor, right?
Right, right. The
Um,
performer has to engage you.
and someone that I think does a little bit of both, and someone that we haven't really talked about too much on this podcast, and I am glad we're going to be able to talk about him a little bit more, is the artist Warren Zevon. He's someone that I've been getting into a lot over the last couple of years. When I started record collecting, I somehow picked up Excitable Boy, which is his biggest album because it contains his biggest hit song, Werewolves of London, which is another good track. It's a funny track. People listen to it during Halloween season. But he's someone that, throughout his whole catalog has funny music. Some of it is dark humor. Some of it is witty. Some of it is just over the top. And then some of it is like sarcastic. And some of it is like really dark. Like, you know, Werewolves of London, it's not super dark, but he does talk about like a werewolf, like, like eating an old lady at one point. Um, the title
Werewolf
track,
with a Chinese menu in his hand.
yeah, the lyrics are like so over the top. They don't make, and that song, it was just like a fun jam song they were doing. Like he didn't think it would even be on the record, let alone his biggest hit. The title track to Excitable Boy is a very like dark song about someone like killing someone else and like eating them and like burying their bones and digging them up later. And but he does it in such, the music is like an upbeat, like there's no minor chord in that song at all. I think it's like mostly just like D, G, A, like it's very upbeat and happy sounding, but the lyrics are dark. And he's got some other like darker songs, like he has a song titled My Shit's Fucked Up, which um at the time it was before he was ever diagnosed with the illness that ended up killing him. But it's like literally it's like he almost saw the future, and he writes a song about going to the doctor, and the doctor tells him, hey, your shit's fucked up. um and he's got some weird songs like Leave My Monkey Alone, which is on the album where REM was his backing band. Which I picked up a vinyl copy of that the other day at my record store because I'd never seen it there before. and there's a couple remixes on the B side, and one of them is a remix by George Clinton.
What?
Yeah.
What type of collab is this? RAM,
Well,
Warren Zevon, George
the
Clinton.
song is actually kind of like a like dance kind of funk song a little bit. It's a weird one.
Really? Okay, I need to
Um,
hear this soon.
well, you might be getting it one of these days. But the song I picked is one of his other kind of bigger songs, and that is the closing track off Excitable Boy called "Lawyers, Guns, and Money." And the song actually was written from supposedly a real life experience, inspired by. Warren Zevon supposedly was in Cuba with his manager, and they were in the taxi, and the taxi driver was like, "I got to stop by this house really quick and do something. It'll just be a minute." And supposedly the taxi driver comes running out with his sister, who apparently had been kidnapped, and he like throws her in the back seat, and they start being chased by the kidnappers, and supposedly Warren Zevon's manager said, "Call my dad and tell him to send some lawyers." And then Warren Zevon replied with, "Yeah, and some guns and money too." And that kind of is partially inspired the song. I mean, the song starts off with the lyric. The song first kind of starts off with like obviously like kind of made up lyrics like, "I went home with the waitress the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too?" And then the second verse, he's talking about gambling in Havana. And then obviously he like gets in some money troubles, and that verse ends with him singing, "Send lawyers, guns, and money, dad, get me out of this." And the whole song is about like him, like I think he sings it in the character of some probably rich snotty kid who's always getting in trouble, thinking that he can get help by calling his dad, to set him up with, lawyers. And the guns and money part I think is kind of like, supposed to be over the top, right? Um, but then like you get like the bridge of the song, which I think is kind of like the point of the song, which is like him not being able to acknowledge that like he's the problem, because in the bridge he sings, "I'm the innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between the rock and a hard place, and now I'm down on my luck." And then maybe my favorite lines at the very end when he sings, "I'm a desperate man. Send lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan." Like, just I don't know, like the song is just it's fun, it's like over the top. It tells like this funny story that like I guess supposedly was partially inspired by a true event in his life. And yeah, I think Warren Zevon's super underrated as a songwriter, a lyricist, pianist, guitarist, singer. Like we're definitely going to be talking about him more in future episodes, because he is someone that is creeping up my list of like my favorite songwriters.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely, and I am familiar with this song, and it is a pretty dang good song. I had no idea about the backstory though on that. That that definitely improves my listening experience now with it. So another artist that we have not talked much about on this podcast, but we need to, is Weird Al Yankovic. And he's a tough one, as in a tough one to pick one song from. Um, so many great ones. One of my favorites, though, or one of the ones that got me into him, was definitely "I Sue Ya," which is his stylistic parody of Rage Against the Machine. Um, and that was the album that got us into Weird Al, if I'm not mistaken, Rico. For you as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and I mean, I'm not I wouldn't even say maybe I'm like a casual listener of his, but yeah, every now and then you got to put on one of his songs. Like I don't know every album of his, and I've not heard every song, but yeah, like that was the first time I've ever heard of him, because that album came out right around the time where like YouTube was popular and like Why Nerdy was trending on YouTube, the music video.
right. And with this song, like he's basically just saying reasons to sue someone, and they just get more and more ridiculous. I sued Duracell. They never told me not to shove that double A right up my nose. I sued Home Depot because they sold me a hammer, which they knew I might drop on my toes. Um, then one of the best ones, I sued Delta Airlines because they sold me a ticket to New Jersey. I went there and it sucked. And his delivery is great because it's Rage Against the Machine, so he's yelling these lines. His backing band's always on point.
Isn't there
His
a really funny lyric about Ben Affleck too?
Yes, I sued Ben Affleck, and then he like pauses. Do I even need a reason?
I like that.
um, Yeah, and I will say with all of Weird Al's parodies, he does try really hard to actually like accurately mimic who he's covering. So whether it's like their little ab libs, whether it's like the band, for example, his cover of Beat It, titled Eat It, the guitarist does a killer job doing an Eddie Van Halen type solo. Especially too, back when he was doing like a lot of the live action videos in his prime, the videos were done super well. One of my favorite videos of his was Fat, his parody of Bad. So you have him dressed up in the giant fat suit, still wearing the Michael Jackson leather suit, and yes, doing the crotch grabs. Um, but yeah, Weird Al's kind of he's how I got into music, was listening to him and thinking this is hilarious, and then realizing, oh wait, I like it for more than just the comedy. I like it for the music too.
Yeah, which I mean, like I mean, I think he's had kind of the same band members for like a long time. And like, yeah, like you said, they really can sound exactly like the song. Like to a point sometimes where you're like, did they just use the track minus the vocals for him to sing over? Like, no, his band recreated the whole song like note for note, you know?
Yeah, it's quite impressive, and also, I mean, it really does show Weird Al's talent as a singer to be able to sing these different songs and different styles,
Yeah.
and to play, the accordion too.
Which is already kind of like a funny, like out of all the instruments, I think the accordion's like the funniest instrument.
Right, it's either that
Like
or the
this,
triangle.
yeah. Or I guess the ukulele.
Yeah, well,
Tiny Tim.
okay, you got a point. But now Billie Eilish plays ukulele, so
Yeah. Well, like Eddie Vedder plays it non-ironically too. So,
that's true.
um, well, speaking of like musicians who like mainly play comedy music, I think this is a good segue to talk about a duo that goes by the name Flight of the Conchords. They're a duo from New Zealand, Brett McKenzie and Jermaine Clement, and you might know them for their HBO show called Flight of the Conchords, same title. It aired in 2007, ran for 2 seasons only, but it was critically acclaimed, had a lot of fans. And at some point when we had HBO, I gave the whole show a watch and I loved it. And in the show, they're like, these two guys from New Zealand who live in America who are trying to become, famous musicians. And whenever they go play a show, they suck. But then later, like earlier in the episode, they'll have something that happens to them in their daily lives that will inspire them to write a song. And then they'll play the song, like they'll play it in the episode, and the song will actually sound great and be really funny. But when they go and play like the song or their songs like at an actual show for people, it sucks and they're not good and no one comes and sees them. So like every episode has at least one song, which eventually each season had like its own soundtrack. And one of my favorites is actually from the very first episode, the pilot episode, and it's a song where you don't really need to know the episode's background to understand the humor of the song. The song's called "The Most Beautiful Girl in the Room," and it's basically about one of the guys seeing this girl at a party, and he thinks like, oh, she's super beautiful, and he like wants to go and talk to her and get to know her, and he like pays her compliments that don't really come off as compliments. Like for example, the title, he calls her not the most beautiful girl in the world, he calls her the most beautiful girl in the room, which and he even says depending on the room. Like he's like, you're the most beautiful girl on the street, depending on the street. Um, and like the song does like kind of tell a story. Like he asked his friend Dave, who like set up the party, hey, do you care if I ask her out? And again, he goes back to paying her compliments. He calls her. He says, "You could be a waitress. You could be an air hostess in the '60s." He says that she's so beautiful, she could be a part-time model, not like a full-time model, but a part-time model. Um, Later on, he's like imagining sharing a kebab with her, which I mean, it's the way they pronounce kebabs.
Oh wait, actually,
Yeah, like in the song, he pronounces it kebab,
but like
but
that's
it's a
how like the
kebab.
New Zealand.
Yeah, that's how they say it.
pronunciation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um, and then at one point he calls her. He says, "You're so beautiful, like a tree or a high class prostitute."
I do remember
Um,
that line.
and then he says, you could be a part time model. You'd probably still have to keep your normal job. Um, so yeah, it's just a funny song where it's like he's taking the cliches of like calling someone so beautiful and then putting a twist on them, and they make them almost sound like insults, kind of. So they have a ton of funny songs. Like you could pretty much go listen to any of their songs and they're funny on their own and with the episode. So, if that's kind of you feel like that's your type of humor, I would definitely go check out the show and check out their songs.
And speaking of like shows, movies that breed a lot of songs and whatnot, one of my favorite movies of all time, the mockumentary Spinal Tap. And yeah, something I just learned recently. Well, I'm kind of embarrassed that I just learned it recently is that Nigel, the guitarist in Spinal Tap, was actually inspired by Jeff Beck, kind of his look and his demeanor in interviews.
Don't feel bad. I didn't know that, but I also don't feel bad because I've never seen this movie. I still got to get to watching it. I know. As someone
Come on.
who likes music, I should have seen this film. I've not gotten the chance.
All right. Well, this will convince you right here. So maybe my favorite song from Spinal Tap, Soundgarden actually covered, believe it or not, is titled "Big Bottom." And what makes it so much funnier is that when you watch the movie and listen to the song, they all come out playing basses. So there's like
Oh,
three
I've
bass
seen
parts
this clip.
going on at
I've seen
once.
this clip online. Didn't they do this actually
Yes.
like on a talk show too, like a late night show?
Did they really? I mean,
I thought because it looked like a live show. Maybe it's from the movie. I don't know, but I know what you're talking about.
I will be tracking down a live clip for this. And I mean, this song's pretty on the nose. It's just a bunch of euphemisms talking about a big bottom. Um, but I think some of the best parts would definitely be big bottom, big bottom. Talk about mud flaps. My girl's got 'em. Uh, big bottom, drive me out of my mind. How can I leave this behind?
God.
Um, yeah. So I mean, I think I'll spare the details for the rest of the song.
Well,
But
is it supposed to be like a play on like the Queen song "Fat Bottom Girls," but also the play on the words that like the bass is like the bottom end of like a song or like a sound palette?
okay, I've thought about the Queen one, but I have not thought about the bass being
That's
the
why
bottom
like the
element.
song is like instead of like guitars and bass, and because I know the clip I've seen, like yeah, he introduces the band member like on lead bass, on rhythm bass, and then even like the synths he's like on bass synthesizer, like he's
Yeah,
it makes sense now that that was the song. I don't think I watched the whole video. I just watched that intro and I was like, that's pretty funny. The thing I
yeah,
remember most from the film, not having watched it, is like the amp turning up to 11.
right. We've all seen that one. Um,
That's classic.
I mean, it's classic for a reason. So yeah. Even though this one, I guess, is pretty cheap humor, there, this one it's the fact that it's a whole song with a bunch of basses in it, and like the delivery is perfect, and it's in a whole full length movie. It just makes this part so iconic to me.
I definitely will get around to watching it. I promise.
So for those of you who need to keep up with the lore here, there's two movies right now that Rico needs to watch with me. One of them is Spinal Tap. The other one is Surfs Up, the documentary of the animated penguins.
Is it a documentary? Because the first time you said that, I thought you were like actually like confusing it with March of the Penguins, which is the actual documentary voiced by Morgan Freeman.
No. It is shot in the style of a
So it's like
documentary.
a mockumentary, like The Office, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's basically Spinal Tap
I think
and
I've
The
seen it like
Office.
once a long time ago, but like not enough to remember it. Like that, between that and like Over the Hedge, which again Ben Folds has the reference there, and Mom Likes Hoodwink. That's another one I remember.
I've heard Hoodwinked is trash, but I remember
We
loving it
watched
growing
it.
up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember most of it, but
There's that one part she really loved, but I can't remember what it
did
was.
I? Did I?
Yeah.
Did I?
Um yeah, and I also gotta watch you mentioned on a couple episodes ago, Harold and Maude. I've never seen that film, and that's like one of your favorites too.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, I'm sure if I went back and watched it, I mean, I'm sure I've seen better movies, but I remember liking it, a lot of it because Cat Stevens does the soundtrack and
Yeah.
kicks ass.
Well, the last song I have for today is a song by Johnny Cash called 25 Minutes to Go. Um, like the Ben Folds song, this song was not written by Johnny Cash. It's actually a song written by author Shel Silverstein, who you might know him from like children's books like The Giving Tree or Where the Sidewalk Ends. Um, and he wrote some songs. I think didn't he also write A Boy Named Sue? Um,
Did
Another
he?
big yeah, yeah, no, Johnny Cash song that also is A Boy Named Sue is, I think, even more popular than 25 Minutes to Go. Shel Silverstein wrote that. So Shel Silverstein, like, I think, liked writing songs too, but they were usually kind of funny songs. And Johnny Cash, like, he didn't care. Like, to him, if it was a funny or good song, he was going to play it, and especially in the end of his career, he did a lot of covers, but I don't know if I mean, this technically is a cover, but 25 Minutes Ago, I first heard it from Pearl Jam doing a cover during their infamous acoustic show at Battle Royal Hall in Seattle. And the song itself is basically about some guy who um, is about to be hung. Like, it's like, imagine this taking place like in a Western film, like, a long time ago. And this guy committed some crime to where he's being hung for it. And the song starts off with him outside of his cell, him outside of the gallows, and he says, I got 25 minutes to go. And then he'll sing a line and then end it with the next line being, now I've got 24 minutes to go. And each line of the song literally ends with him counting down each minute. Um, and it tells a story of him, like, he sings about the town waiting for him, and he sings about him getting beans for his last meal. And then he sings about him trying to get to the governor to like call the thing, to call the whole hanging off, but the governor's out to lunch. He ends up spitting in the eye of a sheriff who tells him, like, I'm gonna watch you die. Like, um, he sings about the preacher, praying for him to save his soul. And again, each line it ends with like, I got 13 minutes to go. I got 12 more minutes to go. And so it's kind of dark humor because it's like, this guy's about to be, he's basically the death penalty. Um, and the song literally ends with, he says, I got one more minute to go. And then he sings, now I'm swinging here and here I go. Oh, and then the song ends. Um, but yeah, it's like, it's funny because it's like, you know, I mean, people were hung, for, death penalty, but like, it's not based off like an actual real life event, like specific event. It's
It's not
just,
actually based on a real big bottom.
I just like it because it's just, again, it's like the Ben Folds song where it's creative the way it was written. Like the fact that each line ends with, I've got this many minutes to go, this many minutes to go. And the song itself was kind of cool. It has a lot of key changes in the song. Um, and it just fits, maybe the Westerns, it just fits Johnny Cash's sound well. I mean, I love the PJ cover of it, but if you really want to hear the song like the way it's supposed to be heard, definitely listen to the Johnny Cash version.
I will say this is the only one of the bunch you recommended that I haven't heard before actually. So I'm definitely after hearing about it, I'm excited to listen to it now.
Yeah, I mean the Pearl Jam version is good too. Like listen to that one, but yeah, I mean the Johnny Cash one, and I think it was like on one of his main albums, but it's also one of the ones he sang during his Folsom Prison Blues
The
concert.
live thing, yeah.
Yeah, which maybe is a little bit more like not. It's the opposite of ironic. It's a little morbid that he sung that song at a prison, but
Yeah, was there a big applause after?
I don't know. I don't think I've heard that version, but
That room has not been more dead.
oh, literally.
Literally. Well, so I think that sums it up for us today with some of our favorite funny songs. Hopefully you guys had some good laughs. I know I did have some as well, and I have a list of songs I need to go revisit now. I may have just started a Weird Al binge, so wish
God.
me luck, guys.
But and speaking of Weird Al, one of my favorites of his that we won't really get into is Trapped in the Drive-Thru. And I have not eaten dinner yet, so all I'm thinking about right now is food and nachos. So that's what I'm gonna go do.
You're not thinking about liver?
No.
All right.
Why
Well,
would I want to eat liver?
if you get the reference, you get the reference. If you know, you know. So, yeah, next time you catch us, we'll be playing something fun, maybe. So look forward to another fun, silly episode. And I kind of forget how we close out these episodes, but until next time, bye-bye. Hello again, everyone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
All right, off to a great start.
I went home with the waitress, the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too? I was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk. Selling lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha! I'm the innocent bystander. Somehow I got stuck between the rock and a hard place. Now I'm down on my luck. Yes, I'm down on my luck. Well, I'm down on my luck. Now I'm hanging in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. Selling lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan.